Yes, good evening. Indira Sharma on behalf of Families for Education Improvement, FEI, in support of Policy 1080 with revisions. We've submitted a red line with my testimony with some suggested changes. FEI is a nonprofit that's dedicated to ensuring that each student has an outstanding education in Howard County, and through its foundation does charitable work, including the weekly food pantries, assisting students in need with school supplies, and paying off student lunch debt. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 14 years, and during that entire time have done diversity and inclusion work as an advocate and leader in the legal profession. This by way of personal background. I also have 3 children in the school system. So I'll focus on 3 revisions. The first being that Section 1 of the policy statement appropriately recognizes that systemic racism, bias, and institutional barriers create inequities in our schools, but it does not go far enough to acknowledge that the other half of the equity challenge is the individual circumstances that some students face, and that we need to focus on the individual child, particularly adverse childhood experiences, poverty, trauma, etc. While the policy does reference the individual child in some places, it seems the focus on the individual is somewhat lost, and it is completely absent from the policy statement framing the purpose. So we would ask that that be revised to have us all understand that to be successful in equity, we have to focus on the systems as well as the individual. Second, Section 3B5 of the policy includes a directive to use Policy 6010 on school attendance areas as a mechanism to establish diverse student populations. This reference is a bit concerning because there's no legal authority in the state law for using school assignment to establish diversity, and the very detailed 21-page handbook that the state put out on a guide to educational equity in Maryland is pretty specific on how to apply the equity lens and lists a number of evidence-based strategies for achieving equity in our schools, and a school assignment is not one of those tools. We also note to the board that the other jurisdictions that have complied with the state regulation, including Montgomery County and Carroll County, for example, have a wonderful policy, very much like Policy 1080 in a lot of the components, but they also have not used school assignment as an equity tool. And then finally, we note that the policy currently delegates sole authority in the superintendent to implement and ensure the success of this policy. We think a better course of action would be for this board to establish an educational equity committee that oversees the superintendent's implementation, particularly because this is a new policy in a very new area, and we could benefit from having stakeholders and experts in diversity and inclusion working with the superintendent to ensure the effectiveness of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Beth.